if you are doing all these, the least of loving on the least of these things and giving of yourself and putting others before you and treating each other's better than you treat yourselves, loving God first and then loving your neighbor, if you're doing all these things, we're going to be ready. Hey everyone, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I'm bringing you the Bible every day for 1 year, 365 days. I'm reading through a chronological Bible reading plan called it's a chronological reading plan. The website that I got it on is called oneyearbibleonline.com. And you would go onto their site, click on their chronological plans because they have a whole bunch of different reading plans. And then you would either go to a link so if you click on it every day, it will take you to a link daily to Bible Gateway, or you can do a printable reading list that you would just print out and then you would read along with your own Bible every day. And that's what I used to use. So I did that all the time, but a friend bought me a Bible. So they also offer these. And they offered in NIV, NLT, and New King James. So if you wanted to take that option, obviously we're near the end. We're at day 302. So we are really getting close to the end. But if you are here for the first time and you're looking at all that information I just gave you, I would actually like that if you find this to be a blessing, I want you to go back to the very beginning and build your foundation from there, because the New Testament is great. I kind of say this every day. Jesus is amazing. He's exactly what you think he is. I hope he is the Messiah. He's the one that was promised, but he's so much more. And you have a deeper and greater understanding if you go back to the beginning, if you go back to your foundation. It was funny. I was just in a Bible study with my group that I have at the gym. And we were going over Priscilla and Aquila met with Apollos, who you hear a lot about Apollos in the end. We haven't heard about him yet, but we're going to come to that. But what was fascinating was Apollos was preaching the word and he loved Jesus and he knew a lot of things and he was really eloquent and he was wonderful. However, Priscilla and Aquila pulled him aside to teach him more. So although for years, probably at this point, he was already preaching and teaching, they pulled him aside to teach him more, because the truth of the matter is the bounty is really never ending. And we kind of think that there's this end game, like, oh, I know it all. I have my doctrine, or I've read my Bible, or I go to church every Sunday. And I'm telling you that my pastor has been through every book. It's not enough, right? If you have the ability and a Bible in front of you, I'm going to go as far to say is you should be in it every single day of your life. There should be no excuse. I mean, relatively speaking, right? Sick, wet, whatever, right? But as a general rule, we should be in our Bibles as those who follow Christ. We should know what Christ says, and we should be reading Christ's word every single day, right? It strengthens our faith, it works on our foundation, and it helps us to be stewards. This whole chapter that we're going to read today is really about being ready. And I don't think you can be ready without reading the Bible. I just don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to go to church just on Sundays and then be ready for the coming of Christ, especially considering that we have the Bible. This might be different, right? God may look differently at those who don't have the availability, right? Like for a missionary that just came into some small island or some inside little tribe, and he's introducing Jesus for the first time, they're going to be treated differently than we are. And we're going to see actually that a little bit today. So let me go backwards to go forward. So today is day 302. It is October 28th. And our reading is Mark 13, 32 through 37, Matthew 24, 36 through 25, 46, and then Luke 21, 34 through 38. It's actually a smaller reading, and most of it we've done before. So I'm going to go through some of it relatively quickly. But I do want to do history first. So for those of you who have been here before, you always know you can jump ahead 2 minutes. I'm a little farther today than I usually am. All right. The Lord made the heavens and the earth, the entire everything as you see it. So all the stars that you see, all of the planets, the moon, the sun, every single thing that you can see with your naked eye. And now that we can see telescopically through all of our satellites and etc., the Lord made all of those things, because the Lord has no beginning and no end. So he existed before all of these things existed. And he is the creator of all of these things. Anything that you see on earth, he created. And in his goodness, he created us separately and uniquely different from anything else on this planet or in this entire universe, no matter how much we hunt for it, right? Like, as far as we know right now, we are it. We are like the top of the food chain in kind of the cosmos. So what he did with us is he created Adam out of the dust, and then he breathed life into Adam, which is something that he didn't do with anything else, including the animals. He just called them into existence. Breathed life into Adam, and then he took a rib out of Adam and created woman. So now they are one unit matched with each other. And then he took those two humans that he created, and then he placed them in this perfect land that he created. And when he placed them in the perfect land that he created, he said, rule over this. You are in charge. The only thing that you can't do is eat from this tree that I give you, which holds the knowledge of good and evil. And then a tempter came in, tempted them, and then Eve ate from that tree of the garden of good, not the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then she shared it with Adam, and he ate from it as well. Once he did, their relationship between them and the Lord was severed. They also got the knowledge of evil, which they didn't have before. So we knew that because he was ashamed. They were both ashamed because they were naked, which is something they didn't know before. So now they had this knowledge that they never had before. Since that time, the Lord has been using people to draw us as a human race back to him and recognizing that he is the creator. He is the one who does all things, and we are better in relationship with him. No human has been able to fully capture this. And so what he has done and what he promised that he was going to do was to send a Messiah that was him, that was himself. It was only God that could do this. So he sent God through a human woman, becoming a human on the earth, fully man, fully God, which he keeps saying, right? How do I know this? It's because in these gospels, he continues to tell the people how God is his father who created him. He has the power through the Father. He's been given everything through the Father. And so he's been explaining how connected they are. He is the Savior, the Messiah, the one who has been sent to save all of the people and bring the nations together. And we're going to see how he does that, but we haven't seen that yet. Right now, he's talking about what's to come. Like, so essentially what we would call end times or apocalyptic literature, like if you want to get fancy. So he's talking about like what happened is they were like, wow, look at this temple. This temple is so amazing. And Jesus was like, that temple's going to fall down. No stone's going to remain on top of it. And they were like, what? When is that going to happen? And then here he starts talking about what's going to sort of be maybe the catalyst and the things that are to come. Some of these things have been fulfilled. Many of these things have not been fulfilled. And so hopefully we were going to see these fulfillments in the future, right? Because the Lord has prophesied these things. So he is in Mark 13, and it says, but about that day. So he's talking about what is to come. So when the sun comes down, the Son of Man, the Son of God, comes down in a cloud, and he says, but at that day and that hour, because they were asking what time it comes. And he says, oh, nobody knows. The angels don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. Only the Father knows. So again, this is, and I've said this before in some ways, like this is that mystery that he is the Father and the Son are two some things that are separate and unique, but they are also the same. And so it's hard for us to understand. And I always go back to, this is the second time I've gone back to the image that I believe it's Ezekiel paints of what it looked like when he saw the Lord and how there were all these eyes and all this crazy stuff. It was like this, it was like fire, it was like clouds, it was like, and it's because it's a concept that's beyond our understanding. And so all we can say is sort of like what it's like. So in my human language, I can say that they are separate and unique, and yet they are also one and the same. And so that's just something that's kind of beyond us. And I only say that because this is how he explains it. This is the information that he's giving us. He's saying, I am the Father is me, we are one, right? And it says, he just said yesterday that the Lord is one, and yet he also says, I am the Son of the Father. So these are those things that are hard to understand. Now he's talking about the same things that he was talking about yesterday, and this whole Matthew section is identical to one that we've seen before, because it says that day and that hour we don't know, but you need to, what did I say yesterday? You needed to be ready, be alert, and you needed to be on your guard. So you needed to be ready for these things to come, and you need to be on your guard for these things to come. So he's continuing to say those things. He says, therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house is going to come back. So you need to always be behaving in a way that you would think the Lord is coming in 5 minutes, right? You don't want to behave in such a way that if the Lord does come, then you don't look or act like you're a follower of the Lord. So always be on watch and always be aware. I'm moving down into Luke 21 where it says, be careful. So here's another warning. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And that day will close on you suddenly like a trap, because you don't know. If you let down your guard and you start doing all of these things to do with immorality, it says carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. These are all things that aren't of the Lord. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of these things are the things that we do every day. Anxieties of life hit us every single day. Do you soak in them? Do you dwell in them? Or do you lay them on the Lord? Do you enjoy time out with friends, or is there always drunkenness, right? Are you living a life of drunkenness? Carousing, are you out and around without a spouse, right? Are you having time with other people all the time? Are you making these ways of your life? Because these things really start out slow, but then they build up, and then you start to find yourself doing these things more and more and more, and then you're turning further and further away from the Lord, and then you are less and less ready when the time comes and he shows up. And then all of a sudden you look and you're 300 yards from the beach, and you were like, what happened? I was just there. That's a friend of mine's husband illustration. I stole that illustration from a friend of mine, and I loved it. I found it to be so wise. It's, you imagine that you're on the beach and you're sitting on the top of the waves, and it's this really slow moving, and then you close your eyes and all of a sudden you're out in the ocean, and you look and the beach is so far away, and you're like, how the heck did I get here? And I only closed my eyes for a second. Being ready really means don't close your eyes. You've got to be ready. You need to be aware at all times. So it says, each day Jesus was teaching these things at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill. I lost my light. So every day he was in the synagogue teaching, and then every night he went out on the Mount of Olives, which I looked up because I wanted to see visually like what the Mount of Olives looks like. And it really is just a mountain. It's not like there are a bunch of homes there and he's going and he's sleeping in a home. He may have been sleeping in a tent, but this was a place where he separated himself from everybody, and he took time just to be with the Lord. We saw in other places where he went to the Mount of Olives to pray. And so we can maybe make an assumption that that's what he's doing here now. So he's with people all day. He's teaching, he's healing, he's loving on people. And then he goes out and he's in relationship with his Father, which is himself. And he's out in there all night and doing those things in order for him to come back and do the things back again with it in the temple with the people. Or he was just finding comfort being out there with the Lord. So it might not necessarily been like more of a rejuvenation, although he was human. And so he needed to eat and he needed to sleep and he needed to do the same things that we need to do. All right, so we're going to go over now. He's giving two parables that are that have to do with being ready. And so just a kind of quick understanding of what these parables mean. He says, at that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins. So he has explained the kingdom of heaven in a few different ways. And I feel like I'm coming to the understanding that the kingdom of heaven is sort of wherever Jesus is, right? Like it's here with you. It also is where we're eventually going to be, but it is also where we are now as long as we are with Jesus. And so he says the kingdom of heaven is like these 10 virgins. So these 10 virgins are waiting for the bridegroom. Clean, pure, waiting to get married. And 5 of them were wise and 5 of them were not very wise. 5 of them, they all had lamps. 5 of them had extra oil that they took with them. 5 of them did not have extra oil. They go out, they're waiting for the bridegroom. As they're waiting for the bridegroom, because they have no idea when he's coming, they fall asleep. As soon as they fall asleep, midnight comes and everyone's like, oh, the bridegroom is here. And so they have to get up, but they have to light their way. It's midnight. That's the whole point of it being midnight, is it's dark. And so they don't know or see where they're going. It's not like don't imagine it looks like here where there's electric lamps on every corner. So they're not really sure where they're going. And so they need the lamps to guide their way, right? Guide their direction. They have enough oil probably to take themselves wherever it is they need to go. Well, the girls who don't have oil are like, hey, can you guys lend me some oil? And they were like, no, because if we lend you oil, then we don't know if we're going to have enough oil to make it there. And then none of us are going to make it there. So we need the oil that we brought, right? They prepared, they planned, they are ready to be able to walk the distance in order to find that bridegroom, where the other five were not. So the other five had to go back and get more oil. By the time they came back, the five got into the wedding banquet with the bridegroom, and the other five got locked out of the banquet. So just sit with that, because they got locked out of the banquet and they tried to come in and they weren't allowed to come in. He replies, truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Now we're going to go down to the story of the three servants. And it says, again, it's going to be like a man going on a journey. This is a very similar story to what we've already heard with Minos. So it says, it's like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. One of them he gave 5 bags of gold. One of them he gave 2 bags of gold. And one of them he gave 1 bag of gold. And it said, each according to his ability, which to me is the important thing here. It is each according to his ability. Well, the guy with 5 bags of gold makes 5 bags of gold. The guy with 2 bags of gold makes 2 bags of gold. The guy with a bag of gold digs up the ground and sticks it in the ground and hides it. And once again, he's like, well, you're a really harsh guy, and I knew you took what you didn't make, and right, you treated people terribly, like all those kinds of things, right? And so he says, I know you're a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold. And the master's like, you wicked, lazy servant. So he's not saying, you know what, you're right, I am harsh. He's laying it out for him. Just because, let's just say, for example, that the master is harsh. Just because the master is harsh doesn't mean you're not supposed to do the things that he told you to do with your stuff. You're still supposed to do your job, because that's your job. And he told him to work, to put that money to work. The master then took that money away from him. And he said, and he gave it to the one who already made some. And he said, they're going to have an abundance. And then he said, throw this worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So once again, he's throwing this guy. So this guy didn't do the job he was supposed to do. And going back to that, he said, to each his ability. He gave him this because he had the ability to work with this money. He wouldn't have given it to him if he didn't know he was able to work with it, right? That's how we say this, each of his ability. So he gave the one more because that one had more ability, and the one used the ability in a good way. He gave the second one just a little bit less, but he gave this third one less, but he gave him some. That means he knows that he can do with it what he's supposed to do with it. And he chose instead not to use the ability he had to do the thing he was supposed to do. So he wasn't on his guard. He wasn't ready. He wasn't careful. He wasn't any of the things that we've been told to do. What he did was he dug himself in the sand, and he kind of hid from all of it because he was afraid of what was supposed to be happening. And because of that, he was thrown out with weeping and gnashing of teeth. That was the first guy. That was the second guy. The first girl, the first set of 5 girls were also thrown out. So in some ways, we're like, okay, it seems like it's a lot of work to get into the kingdom of heaven, to the kingdom of God. Let's see this. He says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory. So now we're back at Matthew 25, and all the angels with him. So as of right now, he is not yet in his glory. So when the Son of Man does come in his glory, and by the way, they could have thought that was going to be in a week, in a month, in a year, right? It didn't have to be how we're still waiting for them. When he comes back with all his glory and all the angels with him, he's going to sit on his glorious throne, and all of the nations are going to be gathered before him. He's going to separate the people into sheep and goats. The sheep are going to be on his right. The goats are going to be on his left, which really I'm swapping them. So this is my right, but I'm going to mess you up. Sheep on the right, goats on the left, and he's going to separate them. And then the sheep, he's going to say, come follow me. And they're going to be like, what happened? And he's going to say, you fed me. You looked at me in prison. You gave me money when I needed it. You fed me. You dressed me. You clothed me, right? You did all these things. And they're like, when did we do this? And he said, when you did this to the least of these. And then the same thing with the goats. He's going to say, you guys are going to be down with the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. And they're going to be like, why? And he said, because when I was here, you didn't feed me. You didn't love me. You didn't clothe me. You didn't visit me while I was in prison, and they're going to be like, when were you ever there? These are people that are following him. So I want to make this really, really clear. These are people that are following him. This is not the Pharisees that he's talking to. He's talking to those that are currently following him. And they're like, when did we not do this to you? Because they're following him, and they're like, Jesus, we would have fed you. And he said, when you didn't do it to the least of these, you didn't do it to me. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they're going to go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous are going to go to eternal life. And so I just want to make a note here that, and I say this because a lot of times I kind of hear these things like, all you have to do is say his name and believe. We're going to see that coming. But there's more to it than that. We need to, like, right now he's being very literal. Like, you need to feed the least of, you need to clothe the least of, you need to visit those in prison, right? The downtrodden. You need to be. You also need to be ready, because if you're not ready, you're not getting in. If you're not careful and you're carousing and there's drunkenness, you're not getting in. And I'm saying getting in like it's a reward, like, oh, I just have to do these 5 things and I'm going to be in. He told them, I don't know, a couple of weeks back, there's a price to be paid to follow him, right? When all these people were following him, and then they were like, oh, I have to bury my dead. And he's like, all right, see you later. And then he said to them, I have no home, I have no food, I have nothing. Do you still want to follow me? Right? You need to know what it is to follow me, because it is not easy. And I'm going to tell you, in some ways, I think we do need to check ourselves. Like, a lot of people are like, well, we don't have to keep worrying about whether we are or aren't saved. I'm going to disagree. I actually think we need to live a life that follows the Lord in the way in which he wants us to be followed. If you are doing all these, the least of, loving on the least of these things, and giving of yourself, and putting others before you, and treating each other's better than you treat yourselves, loving God first and then loving your neighbor, if you're doing all these things, we're going to be ready, because we're going to be holding on to less hostility. We're going to be less frustrated. We're just going to be sitting and waiting and loving and being excited that the Lord is coming. And so when he does come, we're going to be open to it. So while it might seem like it's difficult, like, man, I gotta have my lamp and my oil and my, right, all these things ready, and then I need to feed the poor, and then I need to, how many checks do I need to write? I just showed my age by saying checks. How many people do I need to Venmo in order to do this? And the reality, I think, is we need to live a wholehearted life in worship and honor of the Lord. And then all of these things come because of that. And then when that happens, then we are the righteous sheep that are following. And when we are separated, we're the ones that are following the Lord. I'm ending there today because I think that that's something we need to sit. Well, it's the end, but I also think that I waited until the end to do that, because I think it's something that we really need to soak in, and we really need to be in prayer about, like, what is my life look like on a day-to-day? How do I live every day and every moment of my life? Where do I put the Lord, and where do I put other people? And then how does that reflect how I'm living my life? So that is the end for today. And if you stuck with me, and if this was a blessing, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Keep watching, of course, and keep reading in the meantime. I'll see you guys tomorrow.